The cargo ship Harmony's Dream moved slowly through the dark space between stars. Captain Tejo sat in his chair on the bridge and watched the stars through the front window. The ship was not big or fast, but it was home to 4 people who worked together like family. Minsu the navigator sat at his station checking their path to the outer colonies. His fingers moved over the controls as he made small changes to keep them on course. The young man had been flying ships since he was 15 and knew space like others knew their own streets. Down in the engine room, So-Jin worked on the old machines that kept them moving. She was the best engineer in this part of space, but she chose to work on small ships because she liked the quiet life. Her hands were always dirty with oil, but she could make any machine run better than new. In the kitchen at the back of the ship, Ye-min made bread for their dinner. He was a quiet man in his 40s who never talked much about his past. His hands worked the dough with care as he hummed an old song from Earth. The smell of fresh bread filled the small kitchen and made the ship feel like home. Jamin had been their cook for 3 years now. He made every meal special even when they only had basic food supplies. The other crew members loved his cooking and often said he could make rocks taste good if he tried. He always smiled when they said this and just kept working in his kitchen. The warning alarm broke the peaceful quiet. Minsu looked at his screens and his face went pale. 3 large ships were coming toward them fast and they were not friendly traders. Pirates, Minsu said in a scared voice. Vorac pirates. Captain Tejo felt his stomach drop. Everyone in space knew about the Vorac pirates. They were 8 feet tall with hard shells like insects and sharp claws that could cut through metal. They took what they wanted and killed anyone who tried to stop them. Can we run? Tejo asked, but he already knew the answer. No, sir. They are too fast and we are carrying too much cargo. So Jin ran up from the engine room when she heard the alarm. What can I do, Captain? Nothing, Tejo said sadly. We surrender and hope they let us live. The pirate ship surrounded the Harmony's Dream like wolves around a sheep. The largest ship came close and metal arms reached out to grab their hull. The pirates cut through their door with laser tools and the smell of hot metal filled the air. The first pirate through the door was huge even for a Vorac. His shell was black with red marks and his claws gleamed in the ship's lights. This was Captain Vex Taylor, and his name was known across the galaxy as one who showed no mercy. Humans, he said in a voice like grinding stones. How boring. More pirates came through the hole they had cut. They carried energy weapons and their eyes glowed in the dark like angry demons. They made clicking sounds to each other that might have been their language or just the noise of their excitement. Line up meat things, Vex Taylor ordered. Let me see what you are worth. Tejo, Minsu, and So-Jin stood together with their hands up. They were scared, but they tried to be brave. Jamin came out of his kitchen still wearing his apron with flour on his hands. He stood at the end of the line and kept his eyes down. Vex Taylor walked in front of each human like he was buying animals at a market. When he reached Tejo, he nodded. This one can fly ships. Useful. He moved to Minsu and looked at the navigation, tools on his belt. Navigator, also useful. So-Jin had oil stains on her clothes that marked her as an engineer. Machines need this one. She lives. But when Vex Taylor reached Jamin, he stopped and stared. The pirate looked at the flour on the human's hands and the simple apron he wore. He looked at the kitchen behind him with its pots and pans. What is this one? Vex Taylor asked his crew. A smaller pirate named Crixfor checked the ship's computer. Records say he is the cook captain. He makes food. The silence lasted for 3 seconds. Then all the pirates began to laugh. It was not a nice sound. Their clicking and hissing mixed together like broken glass falling on metal. A food maker, Vex Taylor said between his laughs. What use is a food maker when we have machines that make nutrition blocks? Another pirate called Thelaxon joined the joke. Maybe we should keep him captain. When we run out of real food, we can eat this one instead. The laughter got louder. Some pirates pointed at Jamin with their claws and made jokes about how soft and weak humans looked. They said he probably cried when he cut vegetables and that his greatest battle was against burned toast. Look at him, Crixfor said. He has flour on his hands like a child who played in the kitchen. What kind of warrior gets dirty making bread? Jamin, stood still and quiet through all their mocking. His face showed nothing, but his hands stayed steady even though he was surrounded by killers. The other crew members felt bad for him, but they could not help. "Maybe we should space this useless one now," suggested another pirate. "Why waste food and air on something that cannot fight or work?" But Vex Taylor held up a claw to stop the talk. "No, we keep all of them for now. Even useless things can be sold somewhere." The pirates tied up all 4 humans with metal chains that were too strong to break. They searched the ship and took everything valuable they could find. The Harmony's dream was old, but it was still worth something to the right buyer. "Take them to the holding cell," Vex Taylor ordered. "We go back to Shardnest where we decide what to do with them." As the pirates pushed them toward their own ship, Jae-min walked quietly at the back of the group. The aliens still made jokes about the weak human cook who probably fainted at the sight of blood. They said he would cry and beg when they decided to kill him. But if any of the pirates had looked closely at Jae-min's eyes, they might have seen something that would have made them stop laughing. Behind the calm face of a simple cook was something else. Something that watched and waited and remembered every face that had mocked him. The holding cell was small and dark, with barely enough room for 4 people. They sat on the cold floor and tried to stay warm while the pirate ship carried them away from everything they knew. "What do you think they will do to us?" Minsu whispered. "Use us as workers, probably," Sojin said. "Pirates always need people who can fly ships and fix machines." Taeho nodded, but he was worried about Jae-min. The pirates thought the cook was useless, and useless things did not live long in pirate hands. Jae-min sat in the corner of the cell with his back against the wall. His eyes were closed like he was sleeping, but his breathing was too controlled for real sleep. His hands rested on his knees, and they did not shake even a little. The other 3 did not know that their quiet cook had been many things before he learned to make bread. They did not know about the years when his hands held different tools and his skills were used for purposes that had nothing to do with feeding people. They did not know that underneath the flour and the gentle smile was someone who had walked through fire and came out the other side. Someone who had chosen to leave that life behind and find peace in the simple act of cooking for others. But sometimes the universe does not let people stay peaceful. Sometimes it brings back the things they tried to leave behind and forces them to remember who they used to be. As the pirate ship flew toward their base, Jae-min sat quietly in the dark cell. The aliens thought they had captured a harmless cook, who would cry and die when the time came. They had no idea what they had really brought aboard their ship. The pirate base called Shardnest was built inside a broken asteroid that had once been a moon. The rock was so big that hundreds of ships could dock inside its carved tunnels and caves. Lights glowed in the darkness like angry eyes, and the air smelled of fuel and fear. Jae-min and his crewmates were pulled from their cell when the ship docked. The pirates pushed them through narrow corridors filled with aliens from across the galaxy. Some were pirates like the Vorac, but others were slaves and prisoners who had given up hope long ago. The processing center looked like a warehouse where goods were sorted and tagged for sale. A fat Vorac named Gex Miran sat behind a metal desk and decided what to do with new prisoners. His shell was covered with scars and his eyes were cold as winter stars. "What do we have here?" he said, looking at the humans. Vex Taylor pointed at each prisoner. "Captain and navigator for the raiding fleets, engineer for base maintenance, and this useless one who makes food." Gex Miran looked at Taeho and Minsu and nodded. "Good. We always need humans who can fly. The navigation skills are useful too." He turned to Sojin. "Engineer goes to Sector 7. The machines there break down every few days." But when he looked at Jae-min in his dirty apron, he frowned. "What am I supposed to do with a food maker? Our synthesizers work fine." "Space him," suggested Krixvor. "Or sell him to the fighting pits for entertainment." "Wait," said an old Vorthak, warrior named Yulkareth. His shell was white with age and covered with battle scars that told stories of many fights. "The food machines have been making terrible paste for months. Maybe this human can make the nutrition less awful to eat." Gex Miran thought about this. The crews had been complaining about the bad food and unhappy pirates caused problems. "Fine. Send him to the kitchens in the lower levels. If his food is still bad, we feed him to the crusher beetles." The pirates separated the humans and took them to different parts of the base. Jamin was pushed down long stairways that went deep into the asteroid. The walls here were rough stone, and the air was thick with cooking smells and steam. The kitchen was a huge cave filled with industrial machines for processing food. Giant pots hung from chains and heating units glowed red in the darkness. Slaves from many different worlds worked at cutting tables and stirring stations. They all looked tired and broken. A tall alien with tentacles for arms showed Jamin around the kitchen. This was Vash Orim from the Trill system, and he had been a slave, here for 5 years. His purple skin had faded to gray and his eyes held no hope. "You are the new food slave," Vasharim said in basic Galactic. "Do what they tell you and maybe you live another day." The kitchen made food for over 1,000 pirates and their slaves. Most of it was protein blocks mixed with synthetic nutrients and heated until it was soft enough to eat. The smell was terrible, and the taste was worse. "What did you do before?" asked Click 7, an insect like Zex who worked at the spice station. His name came from the clicking sounds he made when he talked. "I cooked for my crew on a cargo ship," Jamin said simply. The other slaves laughed. But it was not mean laughter like from the pirates. They understood that everyone here had lost something important. "Real cooking," said an old Borland female named Rust Scale. "I remember real food from before the pirates took my world." Jamin looked around the kitchen with the eyes of someone who understood how things worked. He saw where the food came from and how it was processed. He noticed which guards came at what times and where the exits led. Most importantly, he saw that the kitchen connected to many other parts of the base through service tunnels and air vents. The first meal he made was simple. He took the same protein blocks and synthetic ingredients, but he prepared them differently. He heated the protein more carefully and added spices in a way that made the smell better. He mixed textures so the food was not just soft mush. When the guards came to collect the food, they expected the same terrible paste as always, but when they tasted Jamin's cooking, they were surprised. "This does not taste like garbage," said one guard to another. "Still not good," the second guard replied, "but at least I can eat it without feeling sick." Word spread quickly through the base that the food was better. Pirates who usually just ate enough to survive now came back for more. They did not thank the kitchen slaves, but they stopped complaining as much. Vex Taylor came to the kitchen 3 days later with some of his officers. He wanted to see the human who had improved their food. Jamin was stirring a large pot of stew when they arrived. "So you are the meat thing who thinks he can cook," Vex Taylor said. "I do my best with what I have," Jamin replied quietly. The pirate captain tasted the stew and his eyes widened a little. It was still just processed protein and basic nutrients, but somehow it tasted like real food. "Interesting," Vex Taylor said. "Maybe keeping you alive was not a complete waste." The other pirates laughed at their captain's joke, but Jamin just kept stirring his pot. He had learned long ago that showing fear or anger only made bullies worse. "Tell me, Cook," Thelaxon said. "Do you miss your little cargo ship? Do you dream about going back to making bread for other weak humans?" "I think about many things," Jamin answered, "but mostly I focus on the work in front of me." This made the pirates laugh even more. They thought he was talking about cooking, but Jamin was thinking about other kinds of work, the kind of work he had done before he became a cook. As the days passed, Jamin learned more about Shardnest. He talked to the other slaves and found out about the base's weak points. Vasharim knew which power lines fed the main systems. Click 7 had mapped the air vents during his years of carrying food to different sections. Rust Scale remembered which guards were lazy and which ones were dangerous. The kitchen slaves began to trust their new human friend. He worked hard and never complained even when the guards hit him for being too slow. He shared his food with others when they were extra hungry, and he listened to their stories about the homes they had lost. But late at night, when the kitchen was empty and the guards were drinking in other parts of the base, Jamin did different work. He studied the knives and cutting tools. He tested their balance and sharpness. His hands moved in patterns that had nothing to do with cooking. The muscle memory was still there after all these years. The movements that had kept him alive in places where death came fast and without warning. He had tried to forget these skills when he chose the peaceful life of a cook, But the body remembers what the mind wants to forget. From scraps of metal and broken tools, he began to make something special. Working only in the darkest hours, he shaped and sharpened and tested. It would not be perfect, but it would be sharp and strong. The pirates continued to visit the kitchen and make their jokes about the harmless human cook. They saw him kneading dough and stirring pots and cutting vegetables. They saw someone weak and broken who had accepted his fate as a slave. They did not see the way his hands never shook, even when they threatened him. They did not notice how he watched everything and remembered every detail. They could not know that behind his quiet smile was someone who had once been very different. "Look at our pet human," Crix Vor said during one visit. "He works so hard to feed the masters who could kill him any time they want." "Maybe we should make him dance while he cooks," suggested another pirate. "Or have him beg for scraps like a proper slave." Jamin just nodded and kept working. But inside his mind he was making lists. Lists of faces and voices and the places where each pirate kept his weapons. Lists of guard rotations and escape routes and weak points in the base's defenses. The other slaves saw the change in him even if the pirates did not. There was something different about the way he moved now. Something that reminded them that humans had not survived across the galaxy by being weak. "You are planning something," Vashorim whispered one night. "I can see it in your eyes." "I am always planning," Jamin replied quietly. "The question is when to stop planning and start doing." Far above in the main levels of Shardnest, his crewmates worked at their assigned tasks. Teho flew supply runs to nearby systems. Minsu calculated jump coordinates for raiding fleets. Sojin kept the base's old machines running. They sometimes asked about their missing cook when pirates were not listening. The answer was always the same. He was alive and working in the kitchens, just a harmless food slave who caused no trouble. But trouble was coming to Shardnest whether the pirates knew it or not. In the deep kitchens, a quiet man practiced movements that had nothing to do with cooking. And hidden among the flour and spices was something that would soon change everything. Weeks passed in the deep kitchens of Shardnest, and Jamin had become part of the daily routine. The pirates no longer paid much attention to him when they came for food. He was just another broken slave who stirred pots and cut vegetables and caused no problems. But the other kitchen slaves noticed changes in their human friend. He moved differently now when he thought no one was watching. His steps were quieter and more careful. His eyes tracked every sound and movement in ways that had nothing to do with cooking. "You are not what you seem," Vashorim said one evening, as they cleaned the cooking stations. The Trill's tentacles moved slowly as he wiped down metal surfaces. "None of us are what we seem," Jamin replied. "That is how we survive." Click 7 made his clicking sounds that meant agreement. "The human learns fast, faster than most new slaves." "What did you really do before?" asked Rust Scale. The old Borland female had been watching Jamin for days, and she saw things that worried her. "I cooked food for people who worked hard and deserved good meals," Jamin said. This was true, but it was not the complete truth. Late at night, when the kitchen was empty and the guards were drunk in the upper levels, Jamin continued his real work. He had finished making his special tool from kitchen scraps and broken metal. It was not beautiful, but it was sharp and balanced, and it felt right in his hands. The blade was hidden, wrapped in cloth inside a flour sack where no one would think to look. To any guard who checked, it was just another cooking supply among many others. In the darkest corners of the kitchen, he practiced movements that his body remembered from long ago. Footwork that let him move like water around enemies. Hand positions that could turn defense into attack in the space between heartbeats. The ancient arts of war that some humans had learned when Earth was young and fighting was done with steel instead of energy weapons. His muscles ached at first because 20 years of peaceful cooking had made them soft. But slowly the strength returned. The speed returned. The deadly grace that had once made him feared across 3 star systems began to wake up. During the day, he gathered information like a spider gathers silk. Every conversation with the other slaves added threads to his growing web of knowledge about Shardnest and its weaknesses. Vashorim told him about the power distribution nodes that fed electricity to different sections of the base. If someone wanted to cause problems, they could shut down whole areas by damaging the right connections. Click 7 knew the ventilation system better than anyone because he had spent years crawling through ducts to deliver food to remote stations. The air flows through these tunnels here and here. Someone small enough could move through the base without using the main corridors. Russ Scale had been a security chief on her home world before the pirates destroyed it. She understood defensive positions and guard rotations. They change the watch every 6 hours, but there is always a 15-minute gap when the new guards are still getting organized. The other slaves shared their knowledge because they trusted Jamin and because talking about escape made them feel less hopeless. They did not really believe anyone could break free from Shardnest, but planning impossible things helped them stay sane. But Jamin was not planning the impossible. He was planning the very difficult, which was something entirely different. His crewmates sometimes appeared in the lower levels when their work brought them near the kitchens. These meetings had to be brief and careful because guards were always watching. "Are you holding up okay?" Sojin whispered during one such meeting. She looked tired and her clothes were stained with machine oil, but her spirit was not broken. "I am managing," Jamin replied as he handed her a bowl of stew. "How are Tai-Ho and Min-Su?" "Scared but alive. The pirates work us hard, but they need our skills so they do not hurt us too much." "Good. Stay strong and be ready when the time comes." Sojin looked at him strangely. Something in his voice was different from the gentle cook she had known on their cargo ship. "Ready for what?" "You will know when it happens." The pirates continued to visit the kitchens and make their cruel jokes about the weak human who had accepted his place as a food slave. Vex Talar often brought guests to show off his collection of workers from different worlds. "This is our human cook," he would say, pointing at Jamin. "Watch how tame he has become. See how he bows when I speak." To him, Jamin always bowed deeply and kept his eyes down. "How may I serve you, Captain?" The guests would laugh at this display of broken spirit. They would make comments about human weakness and how easily the species could be trained like pets. "Does he know any tricks?" asked a visiting pirate captain named Morvalax. "Can you make him dance or sing for entertainment?" "He only knows how to cook," Vextaler replied. "But he does it well enough to keep the crews fed without complaint." They did not see the way Jamin's fingers moved slightly when they spoke. They did not know he was measuring distances and angles and thinking about how long it would take to reach each of them, if he needed to. They saw submission where they should have seen calculation. The weapon he had made grew sharper with each night's work. He tested its edge on vegetables and practice cuts through empty air. The balance was perfect for his hands, and the weight felt like an extension of his arm. More importantly, he was remembering skills that went beyond simple sword work, the mental discipline that let him stay calm in chaos, the ability to read an enemy's intentions in the split second before they acted, the cold focus that turned fear into fuel for action. These were not things he had learned as a cook. They came from darker years when his hands had held different tools, and his job had been to solve problems that could not be solved with words or negotiations. "You were a soldier," Rust Scale said one night. It was not a question. Jamin paused in his cleaning of the cooking pots. "I was many things before I learned to make bread. A good soldier or a bad one. I was very good at what I did. That is why I stopped doing it." The old Borlan nodded with understanding. She had seen enough war to know that the best soldiers were often the ones who hated fighting the most. "Will you teach us?" asked Click 7. "If we are going to die here anyway, maybe we should die fighting." "Fighting is not about dying," Jamin said quietly. "It is about living when everyone else thinks you should be dead." He began to teach the other slaves small things. How to move quietly through the kitchen without making noise. How to use cooking tools as weapons if they had to. How to watch for weaknesses in the guards who came to collect food. They learned slowly because most of them had never been fighters. But they learned with the desperate hope of people who had nothing left to lose. The days grew into weeks, and still Jamin waited. He could have tried to escape at any time, but escape was not his real goal. He was waiting for something specific, an opportunity that would let him do more than just run away. "Why do we wait?" Vashorim asked during one of their quiet conversations. Each day we stay here is another day closer to death. Because running away solves nothing, Jamian explained. They would just hunt us down or capture new slaves to replace us. But if we wait for the right moment, we can do something that will matter. What kind of moment? The kind where all the important enemies are in one place at the same time. News traveled fast through the slave networks of Shardnest. A visiting pirate captain was coming for important negotiations. There would be a feast in the main dining hall with both crews present. All the leaders and officers would be gathered to eat and make deals. When Jamian heard this news, he smiled for the first time since his capture. Not the gentle smile of a cook, but something sharp and cold that made the other slaves step back. Now we wait just a little longer, he told them, and then we see what happens when predators discover they have been hunting the wrong prey. The blade waited wrapped in cloth among the flour and spices. Soon it would taste something other than vegetables and empty air. Soon the galaxy would remember that humans had not conquered the stars by being gentle. But first, there would be one more feast in the dining halls of Shardnest. One more gathering where pirates would laugh and mock and think themselves safe in their stronghold carved from broken stone. They had no idea that their harmless cook was counting down the hours until their laughter stopped forever. The day of the great feast arrived like storm clouds gathering over Shardnest. Captain Torvexel had come with his entire crew to negotiate territory rights with Vex Talar. Both pirate fleets were some of the most dangerous in this part of the galaxy. In the kitchens deep below the main hall, Jamian worked with steady hands to prepare the massive meal. 40 of the deadliest pirates in known space would be eating his food tonight. They would sit together in one room making jokes and threats while they decided how to divide the shipping lanes between their fleets. "Are you ready?" Vashorim whispered, as they loaded the first course onto serving carts. "I have been ready for weeks," Jamian replied. His voice was calm, but something had changed in his eyes. The gentle cook was gone and something else looked out through his face. Click 7 made nervous clicking sounds as he helped carry the food. What if the plan fails? What if we all die tonight? Then we die as free beings instead of slaves, said Rustscale. The old Borlan had volunteered to help even though she could barely walk. Some things are worth dying for. The main dining hall was carved from solid rock and decorated with the skulls of defeated enemies. Long tables formed a square in the center, with the pirate captains sitting at the head positions. Their crews filled the rest of the space, creating a sea of claws and fangs and glowing eyes. Jamian pushed his serving cart into the hall and immediately felt the weight of hostile attention. Dozens of alien predators turned to look at the small human in his simple cook's apron. To them, he was just part of the background. Furniture with legs that brought them food. Vex Taylor stood up and raised a cup of fermented liquid. "Brothers, in piracy. Tonight we divide the space lanes fairly and make ourselves richer than kings." The assembled pirates cheered and banged their weapons on the tables. The sound echoed off stone walls like thunder in a cave. Torvexal was even larger than Vex Taylor, with battle scars covering his black shell. "Let us eat well and plan better. The shipping companies will learn to fear our names even more." As the feast began, Jamian moved between the tables serving food and refilling cups. The pirates barely noticed him except to shove him aside when he moved too slowly. He was just a slave doing slave work while the important beings made important decisions. But he was listening to every word and watching every face. He memorized who sat where and who carried which weapons. He noted which pirates were already drunk and which ones stayed alert. Most importantly, he watched the exits and counted the guards. "Bring more meat," Crixvor shouted at him. "And make it hot this time, or I will use your bones to pick my teeth." "Yes, master," Jamian said with a bow. He returned to the kitchen and came back with fresh plates of steaming food. The evening continued with the pirates getting louder and more aggressive as they drank. They told stories of successful raids and compared scars from old battles. They argued about territory and threatened each other over insults both real and imagined. "I remember my first human ship," laughed Thelaxon. "The crew cried like babies when we boarded them, especially the females." "Humans are good for slaves but useless for fighting," agreed another pirate. They break too easily when you hurt them. Jamin continued serving food and cleaning empty plates. His face showed nothing, but inside his mind he was making final calculations. The room was full now with all the most important pirates in one place. The guards were relaxed because they felt safe in their own base. It was almost time. Torvexel's Lieutenant Zeph Korath was getting drunk on the fermented liquid and looking for trouble. He was smaller than most Vorthak, but he made up for it by being extra cruel to anyone weaker than himself. "You," he called to Jamin. "Human slave. Come here." Jamin approached the table with his eyes down. "How may I serve you?" "Dance for us," Zeph Korath ordered. "I want to see how humans move when they are scared." "I do not know how to dance," Jamin replied quietly. The pirate grabbed him by the arm with claws that dug into his flesh. "Then I will teach you. First lesson is learning to scream properly." "Stop playing with the food slave," Vextaler called out. "We have business to discuss." But Zeph Korath was too drunk to listen to reason. He pulled out a curved knife and held it close to Jamin's face. "Maybe I should cut off a finger to see if human meat tastes better than his cooking." "Please," Jamin said in a voice that sounded terrified. "I will do whatever you want." This made all the pirates laugh even harder. They loved seeing fear in their victims. It reminded them of their power and superiority over weaker beings. "Look how he begs," Zeph Korath said, waving his knife. "Humans have no dignity at all." But as the pirate raised his blade, something changed in Jamin's posture. His shoulders straightened and his head came up. When he looked at Zeph Korath, his eyes held no fear at all. "I am sorry," he said in a voice that was completely different from before. "But I am done being your entertainment." Before anyone could react, his hand moved to the flour sack he had brought with the last course. The hidden blade came free in one smooth motion that was too fast for alien eyes to follow. Steel sang as it cut through air, and then through something much softer. Zeph Korath's head separated from his body and hit the stone floor with a wet sound. His body stayed upright for 2 seconds before collapsing in a spreading pool of dark blood. The dining hall went completely silent. 40 of the galaxy's deadliest pirates stared at the human cook who now held a sword that gleamed with fresh death. "What?" Vextaler started to say, but Jamin was already moving. The second strike took Krixvor across the throat before he could reach for his weapon. The third opened Thel Axon from chest to hip in a diagonal cut that painted the wall, behind him with alien blood. Panic erupted as the pirates realized what was happening. They scrambled for their weapons and tried to get away from the small human who moved through them like death itself. But Jamin was no longer the quiet cook who had stirred their soup and cleaned their plates. This was Master Sergeant Jamin of the Republic Special Forces, veteran of the Centauri Wars, holder of the Golden Star for actions above and beyond the call of duty, a man who had walked away from killing 20 years ago but had never forgotten how to do it perfectly. His blade moved in patterns that were older than spaceflight. Ancient sword techniques from Earth's bloodiest centuries flowed together with modern combat training. Every cut was placed exactly where it would do the most damage. Every step took him to where his enemies were weakest. Torvexel tried to draw his plasma pistol, but the human was inside his reach before the weapon cleared its holster. The sword took him through the heart and out the back in a thrust that lifted the huge pirate off his feet. "Kill him," Vextalar screamed, but his crew was already trying. Energy bolts filled the air where Jamin had been standing, but he was no longer there. He flowed between the beams like water finding cracks in stone. A pirate with 4 arms tried to grab him from behind but found only empty air as Jamin spun away from the attack. His return strike removed all 4 arms in 2 quick cuts that crossed each other perfectly. The dining hall became a slaughterhouse as the human warrior carved through aliens who had thought themselves the apex predators of the galaxy. They were strong and fast and armed with modern weapons, but they had never faced anything like this. Some pirates tried to run for the exits, but Jamin had studied the room for weeks. He knew every entrance and every hiding place. His blade found them in the corridors and behind overturned tables and pressed against the walls in terror. "What are you?" One dying pirate gasped as his life leaked out through a cut across his chest. Someone who tried very hard to be something else. Jamin replied. Then the sword ended the alien's suffering with a precise thrust. The battle lasted less than 10 minutes, but it felt like hours to the few pirates who survived long enough to see the end. Bodies lay scattered across the stone floor in positions that told the story of their desperate final moments. Vex Tyler had barricaded himself behind an overturned table and was firing his energy weapon in all directions. You cannot win, human. More guards are coming. You will die here. Everyone dies somewhere, Jamin said calmly as he approached through the smoke and chaos. The only question is whether we die as prey or predators. The pirate captain's final shot went wide as terror ruined his aim. The sword took him cleanly through the center of his shell and pinned him to the wall behind his hiding place. When the killing stopped, Jamin stood alone in the ruined dining hall. His simple cook's apron was soaked with alien blood and his sword dripped with the proof of what he had done. Around him lay the bodies of 40 pirates who had learned too late that some prey bite back. The silence was broken by footsteps as his crewmates entered the hall. Taeho, Sojin, and Minsu stared in shock at the carnage their gentle cook had created. Jamin, Sojin whispered. What have you done? He looked at them with tired eyes that had seen too much death in too many places. What I had to do. Who, are you really? Taeho asked. Someone I used to be, Jamin replied as he wiped his blade clean on a dead pirate's cloak. Someone I hoped never to be again. But there was no time for long explanations. Alarms were sounding throughout Shardnest as news of the massacre spread. More pirates would come soon and they would bring heavy weapons and reinforcements. The alarms screaming through Shardnest sounded like wounded animals crying for help. Emergency lights flashed red against stone walls as pirates throughout the base tried to understand what had happened in their dining hall. Jamin led his crew through corridors he had memorized during weeks of planning. Behind them, the kitchen slaves had begun their own revolt, just as they had promised. Vash Orim and Click 7 were shutting down power systems, while Rust Scale helped coordinate attacks on guard positions. This way, Jamin said, moving through service tunnels that most pirates did not even know existed. His sword was still in his hand and alien blood still dripped from its edge. Sojin tried to keep up while her mind struggled to accept what she had seen. The gentle man who had made them fresh bread every morning had just killed 40 of the galaxy's most dangerous pirates with nothing but a kitchen knife shaped into a sword. How did you learn to fight like that? She asked as they climbed maintenance stairs toward the upper levels. Long story, Jamin replied. Ask me again when we are safe. A squad of pirate guards rounded the corner ahead of them with weapons drawn. Their leader was a massive Vorthak named Gexmiran, who had processed them when they first arrived as prisoners. Stop right there, humans, he shouted. Surrender now and maybe we will only torture you for a few days before we kill you. Get behind me, Jamin told his crewmates. Then he walked toward the armed pirates like he was taking a casual stroll. Gexmiran raised his plasma rifle with confidence. He had killed dozens of escaped slaves over the years, and this would be no different. Humans were weak creatures who died easily when you shot them. But when he pulled the trigger, Jamin was no longer where the weapon was pointing. The human had moved faster than alien eyes could track, and now he was inside the range where energy weapons were useless. The sword opened Gexmiran from his left shoulder to his right hip in one diagonal cut that split his shell like breaking an egg. The other guards tried to bring their weapons to bear, but they were too slow and too close together in the narrow corridor. Jamin moved through them like a dancer performing a deadly routine. Each step put him in the perfect position for the next strike. Each cut removed another threat before it could become dangerous. In 30 seconds, 5 heavily armed pirates lay dead, and the human was not even breathing hard. How? Minsu whispered, staring at the bodies. Practice, Jamin said simply as he cleaned his blade again. Lots of practice. They reached the docking bays where hundreds of pirate ships waited in the artificial atmosphere of the asteroid's carved interior. The Harmony's dream was exactly where they had left it weeks ago, but now it was surrounded by guard posts and sensor arrays. We will never reach it without being seen, Taeho said, looking at the defensive positions. Yes, we will, Jamin replied. Because they are not looking for someone like me. He handed his sword to Sojin and picked up a plasma rifle from one of the dead guards. "Stay here until I signal you." Before any of them could object, he walked out into the open docking area like he owned the entire base. His bloody apron was gone, now replaced with armor stripped from a dead pirate. In the flashing emergency lights, he looked like just another guard responding to the crisis. The sentries at the checkpoints barely glanced at him as he passed. Everyone was focused on the chaos in the lower levels where explosions and weapons fire marked the slave uprising. No one expected trouble in the supposedly secure docking areas. Jaemin reached the first guard post and knocked on the door. When it opened, he smiled politely at the surprised pirate inside. "Emergency orders," he said in perfect Vorac battle language. "All guards report to Sector 7 immediately." The guard looked confused, but orders were orders during a crisis. He grabbed his weapon and ran toward the emergency without asking questions that might have saved his life. Within 10 minutes, Jaemin had cleared 3 guard posts and disabled the sensor arrays watching their ship. He signaled his crewmates, who ran across the open space and climbed aboard the Harmony's Dream. "How do you speak their language so well?" Taeho asked as he started the ship's engines. "I spent 2 years infiltrating Vorac military units during the war," Jaemin said. "You pick things up." "What war?" Sojin demanded. "What are you not telling us?" But there was no time for explanations. Pirates throughout the base had finally realized what was happening, and they were converging on the docking bays in force. Energy bolts began hitting their ship's hull as the Harmony's Dream lifted off its landing pad. "Get us out of here," Jaemin ordered, taking the gunner's position. The ship's small defensive weapons were not much, but they were better than nothing. More pirates poured into the docking bay, firing everything they had at the escaping ship. But the Harmony's Dream was already moving toward the exit tunnel that led to open space. A group of pirate fighters tried to intercept them, but Jaemin had fought in space battles before. His targeting was precise and deadly as he picked off the fastest ships before they could get into attack position. "Jump coordinates laid in," Minsu called out from his navigator station. "Do it," Taeho said. Space twisted around them as the Harmony's Dream entered hyperspace and left Shardnest far behind. In the sudden silence that followed their escape, the crew finally had time to think about what they had witnessed. "Jaemin," Sojin said quietly, "we need to talk." He nodded and set down the gun controls. "I suppose you do deserve an explanation." They gathered in the common area, where they had eaten so many meals together in happier times. Jaemin looked older now, as if the fighting had aged him years in a single day. "My name is Master Sergeant Jaemin Park of the Terran Republic Special Forces," he began. "I served for 15 years in conflicts across 3 star systems: the Centauri Wars, the Vega Rebellion, the Proxima Incident." His crewmates listened in stunned silence as he told them about battles fought in the darkness between stars, about missions that never appeared in official records, about things he had done in the name of human survival that still haunted his dreams. "I was very good at killing," he said simply. "Too good. When the wars ended, I looked at my hands and realized they had forgotten how to create things. They only knew how to destroy." "So you became a cook," Taeho said, understanding finally dawning. "I wanted to feed people instead of fighting them. I wanted to make things that brought joy instead of death. For 20 years, I thought I had succeeded." "But you never really stopped being a soldier," Sojin observed. "No, I just tried to pretend I was something else." The story of what happened at Shardnest spread across the galaxy faster than ships could carry it. Pirates who survived the slave uprising told tales of the human demon who had killed their leaders with nothing but a sword. The stories grew in the telling until Jaemin became a figure of legend. Some said he was 8 feet tall and could cut through starship hulls with his bare hands. Others claimed he could kill a dozen enemies with a single sword stroke, or that laser beams passed through him like he was made of smoke. The truth was impressive enough. A human cook who was really a veteran warrior had infiltrated a pirate stronghold and single-handedly destroyed its leadership. Word spread through criminal networks that humans might be more dangerous than anyone had realized. Pirate crews began avoiding ships with human cooks. Some refused to attack human vessels at all, afraid they might contain hidden soldiers. The legend of the Blade Cook became a story that pirates told their young to teach them about overconfidence and the dangers of underestimating prey. Jae-min tried to return to his quiet life, but the galaxy would not let him rest. Other cargo crews requested him as protection when they flew through dangerous space. Military recruiters offered him command positions in the growing tensions with alien empires. He turned them all down and tried to focus on his cooking. But the sword he had forged in the pirate kitchens now hung on the wall of his cabin within, easy reach. Some lessons once learned could never be forgotten. Standing in his rebuilt galley aboard a new cargo vessel, Jae-min kneaded bread dough and tried to find peace in the simple act of making food. But his hands remembered other skills now, and his dreams were filled with the faces of enemies he had killed. The communication system chimed with an emergency signal. Another human ship was under attack by pirates in a nearby system. The crew was calling for help, but no military vessels were close enough to respond in time. Tae-ho looked at his cook who had saved them all. "It is your choice, Jae-min. We will support whatever you decide." Jae-min set down his bread dough and looked at the sword hanging on the wall. He had tried to leave that part of himself behind, but some responsibilities could not be abandoned. "Set course to intercept," he said quietly, "and tell them help is coming." As the Harmony's dream changed course toward battle, Jae-min prepared himself for what he would have to do. He put on simple clothes and tied an apron around his waist. To anyone who saw him, he would look like just a cook bringing food to hungry people. But hidden beneath the flower and gentleness was someone who had walked through hell and learned to make hell afraid of him. The galaxy's predators had made a mistake when they assumed that humans were only prey. Now they were learning that the most dangerous hunter is often the one who pretends to be harmless until the moment they choose to be anything but.